smorgasbord of information that I hope that y'all will find interesting, and that each of you will find something that's especially interesting. I'm interested in a lot of color people here. I have a couple of sort of little vignettes to read during the presentation, so I hope that y'all enjoy this. So sustainability is a word you hear a lot of places now, and yeah, it's on. And it's a little bit like my dad used to say, losing weight is easy. All you have to do is burn off more calories than you eat. And sustainability is a little bit like that. It's a very simple concept, but the execution is a bit more challenging, especially since we've sort of created this way of living that is really kind of wires into a way of behaving and a way of doing things that requires a different way of thinking. You know, as Einstein said, we don't get out of the problem by thinking the same way we got into it. So when you talk about sustainability, this is the definition that you usually see. It's from the Brundtland Commission report in 1987, and it's development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Once again, simple. How does that happen? I love this one. The Iroquois said that they didn't make any decision without thinking how it would affect the next 7 generations. That's a very prudent way of thinking. We haven't been good about that. And this is the preamble of the National Environmental Protection Act. That is the very beginning of the Environmental Protection Agency. And before the word sustainability was coined, but it summarizes it very well. And that is that we declare a national policy which encourage productive and enjoyable harmony between man and his environment, and to promote efforts which will prevent or eliminate damage to the environment and the biosphere, and stimulate the health and welfare of man. I don't want to stand. Anyway, that kind of really sums it up. Because, you know, we kind of like the planet, it kind of takes care of us. Sustainability is very often spoken of as this three-legged stool that we have to balance: economy, social equity, and environment. But that's in some ways a little bit of an off way to look at it. And that's because an economy can't exist without the society which creates a need and a context for it. But a society can't live without the environment which provides the resources and you know, those life-giving properties like air and water and food. It's kind of hard to go on without those. So if anybody who doubts that needs to look at some of the problems that we've run into in the past. And so I don't know how many of you remember Love Canal, but it was a dump site for old chemicals. They built houses next to it. The kids got sick. There were birth defects and a lot of really nasty stuff, and just moving everybody out. Superstorm Sandy is another good example. Storm came in, destruction of the environment, destruction of property, devastation of the economy. So there are these ripple effects that when you don't take care of the environment, it repercusses, and it comes back to all the things that we are used to taking care of us. So an important concept when you think about this is this concept of ecosystem services, and that is what kind of services, goods and services really, does the planet provide for us? And in fact, when you look at the Earth's resources as capital, it's considered natural capital, then the renewable resources that it gives us are considered really kind of dividends of that natural capital. And, you know, we always do best in the long term if we don't start burning up our capital. So this is some examples of the resources that the Earth gives us. So pollinators, we would be in really, really rough shape without pollinators, and pollinators are in really rough shape right now. Bees are having hive collapse, things going on. Butterflies are threatened. You know, there's a lot going on. this is one of my favorites. This is the water cycle. So, you know, we have a limited amount of water on the Earth. The water that we have has been there since the Earth was really created. The dinosaurs drank the same water we do. And the Earth continually cleans it and gives it back to us in a really, really nice recycled way. And it does all those things without cost. This is just sort of this, it's one of my favorite quotes, and that is when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And this is this interconnection of all of the aspects of the ecosystem. And I love this little diagram because it says, a simplified food web for the Northwest Atlantic. So it's a pretty complicated system, and it usually works pretty well. So I have a little bit of a vignette I want to read to you from one of my favorite books, Natural Capitalism, that is just to sort of give an inclination of the way that things are interconnected. Consider what happened in Borneo in the 1950s. Many Dayak villagers had malaria, and the World Health Organization had a solution that was simple and direct. Spraying DDT seemed to work. Mosquitoes died and malaria declined. But then an expanding web of side effects, consequences you didn't think of, quips biologist Garrett Hardin, the existence of which you will deny as long as possible, started to appear. The roofs of people's houses began to collapse because the DDT had also killed tiny parasitic wasps that had previously controlled thatch-eating caterpillars. The colonial government issued sheet metal replacement roofs, but people couldn't sleep when the tropical rains turned the tin roofs into drums. Meanwhile, the DDT poisoned bugs were being eaten by geckos, which were eaten by cats. The DDT invisibly built up in the food chain and began to kill the cats. Without the cats, the rats multiplied. The World Health Organization, threatened by potential outbreaks of typhus and sylvatic plague, which it had itself created, was obliged to parachute 14,000 live cats into Borneo. Thus occurred Operation Cat Drop, one of the odder missions of the British Royal Air Force. So, repercussions that we don't foresee, and the history of the Industrial Revolution onward is filled with unforeseen and unintended consequences because we haven't understood the interconnections. So how do we go about not messing that up then? A really great sustainability paradigm that I like is the natural step. And they have a 4-step way to live sustainably. And the first step is that resources that are used are renewed at least as fast as we use them. So planting trees as we cut them down, using renewable sources of energy. Wind actually is cost comparable to coal and gas now. The second is that we don't damage the planet physically. So this is some previous wetlands that were dredged and filled and turned into nice homes, they look like. The problem is that wetlands provide water filtration for pollution and storm buffering. So those ecosystems no longer provide that service. And a storm is going to make these places more vulnerable to whatever's going to happen because they're right in the middle of what used to be the buffer zone. And this is mountaintop removal coal mining, which they take the tops off the mountains and then they dump them into the streams, and it runs it ruins the streams and it kills the fish and it runs the pollution down into the lakes. So nasty stuff. 3, don't damage the planet with pollution. So I don't know how many of you have even heard of Denora, Pennsylvania. Anybody heard of Denora, Pennsylvania? Come on. Back in the early mid-century of the last century, Denora was one of the places that was very heavily steel-oriented and unfortunately located in kind of a natural bowl, kind of like the one LA is in. The pollution, it was up in this bowl, killed dozens of people, sickened hundreds, killed livestock. It was really, really nasty. This was the kind of thing that happened along with this, which is the burning of the Cuyahoga River. So they were dumping stuff into the Cuyahoga River, and the river caught fire. This is the kind of stuff that happened that is the reason my agency exists. And a lot of people, especially younger people, don't even know that. This is ocean plastic. So there are huge drifts of, islands of plastic floating in the oceans causing havoc with wildlife, especially sea turtles and birds and other things that eat it, not knowing that it's not good. This is a place where the fish they're advised not to eat the fish. And so there are, a big one is mercury from coal burning. Another one is dioxin, some polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So these pollutants that don't break down quickly, and mercury never breaks down, deposit into aquatic ecosystems, magnify up the food web, and then they put fish advisories because you do not want to eat the fish. Mercury especially is a neurotoxin, and if you're little girls or women of childbearing age especially don't want to eat the fish when they're mercury advised. And the fourth is that people's needs are met around the world, that they have food, that they have water, and that they have a roof over their heads. So not just Americans, but everybody. So from a business perspective, that's the perspective y'all have. What does this really mean? Well, what we're finding is that people are becoming more and more aware, both from the customer perspective and from the business perspective. So I just have some little things to show you. No business on a dead planet. Want more customers? Become a green company. This is interesting when you find out that the stocks are beginning to respond. This one is a Fortune thing where it's talking about more companies are looking at social purpose. Why? It helps drive purchases. Already I knows that. Patagonia. This is not described as sustainability, but it's something that comes into this, and that's this eco-effectiveness, where you get more with less. So creating more value with fewer resources and throwing less away. So anything that's waste means that you had to buy something and then store it and then throw it away. And if it's toxic, you're having to pay and account for where it's gone and what happens to it. Even Dow Jones has a sustainability index. And I love this one. This is from the Harvard Business Review, which shows that high sustainability companies significantly outperform their counterparts over the long term, both in the stock market as well as their own accounting performance. Whether this is cause or effect, we don't know, because as you go back and look at the lean kind of a thing, sustainability companies are very often much more aware of what they're buying, what they're using, how it has to be disposed of, not wasting stuff. So either way, it's a good thing. And one way to look at how to reevaluate or how to evaluate your company is to look at least for sustainability purposes, how does nature do something? Because that's a model that's worked for a long, long time. As Amory Lovin says, anything that didn't work was recalled by the maker. And so there's some real interesting things. Obviously, nature runs on solar energy. Aside from uranium, all power comes from solar energy. Diversity is really important because it provides for the redundancy that allows for resiliency and some buffering capacity. Nature trades locally, and this is really kind of the most important thing, which is everything is connected to everything else, and everything has this constant equilibrium of creation and destruction. So everything is in a cycle. You know, water cycle, air cycle, nutrient cycle. You know, trees die and become, soil, which grow more trees. And it sustains. It keeps going, and it nourishes. So here's our green chemistry page. I'd encourage y'all who work in the chemistry field to look at it. It's all about making products that do not create the bad chemicals that create the impacts. And another way, and I would very much encourage those of you who are looking at how nature can help with color. There's this thing called the Biomimicry Institute. Janine Benyus wrote this book called Biomimicry, and she talks about a couple of examples, and I'll show another one in a minute. But for example, an abalone shell is stronger than the tiles on the space shuttle, the re-entry tiles. But it's created in very cold water out of stuff that they filter from the water. You know, so why can't we do that? This is an example of a termite mound creating a building that's livable without being, you know, using air conditioning. So they look at the temperatures inside a termite nest stays constant within 1 degree day and night, while the temperatures outside are swinging from 42 degrees centigrade to 3 degrees centigrade. So why can we not do that? And that's especially important when you look at energy, a rural energy grid. You look at places that have blackouts. A lot of those buildings aren't even survivable if they don't have air conditioning. So biomimicry, I looked that up because there's a lot of things that you can learn there. And this is just some other stuff. Pure Bond hardwood is made from this really cool non-formaldehyde binding that this guy figured out when he was sitting on a beach in California looking at the mussels that were holding on to the rocks, thinking, wow, the waves are hitting them, and it's cold, and it's wet, and yet they can hold on there really tightly. So he isolated the proteins, and he synthesized them from soy and created this hardwood that's, you know, formaldehyde-free, environmentally safe, cost-competitive, and biodegradable. So a real improvement. Low VOC and no VOC paints, which affect ozone. We have a new Safer Choice label at EPA to help you find products for your home and work. And I have another story that I think will be very resonant for those of you in the textile industry, because it's about the textile industry. A few years ago, this is Bill McDonough, who you may have heard of. A few years ago, we helped to conceive and create a compostable upholstery fabric, a biological nutrient, a fabric so safe one could literally eat it. European government regulators have recently defined the trimmings of the textile mill's fabric as hazardous waste. We sought a different end for our trimmings, mulch for the local garden club. If the naturally derived fabric was to go back into the soil safely, it had to be free of mutagens, carcinogens, heavy metals, endocrine disruptors, persistent toxic substances, and bioaccumulative substances. 60 chemical companies were approached about joining the project and all declined. Finally, Ciba-Geigy agreed to join. With that company's help, the project team considered more than 8,000 chemicals used in the chemical industry and eliminated 7,962. The fabric, in fact, an entire line of fabrics, was created using only 38 chemicals. When regulators came by to test the effluent, they thought their instruments were broken. After testing the influent as well, they realized that the equipment was fine. The water coming out of the factory was as clean as the Swiss drinking water going in. The manufacturing process itself was filtering the water. He also reported a reduced production cost because there were no regulatory concerns and cheaper chemicals. And he said, the design concept, as he puts it, had taken the filters out of the pipes and put them where they belong, in the designers' heads. And I think they lost one color when they did that. So the possibilities are really cool. I love this one. I love that. Isn't that great? So let's go from business to your own personal life, since I didn't know. I think there would be some people who are interested in that as well. When you want to look at your own personal footprint, It's a really cool thing to go and look at this website, which is www.myfootprint.org, and it will ask you all sorts of questions about kind of house you're in, how do you get around, what do you eat, how much stuff do you buy and throw away. Interestingly, the U.S. is 5% of the global population, but 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions and 25% of the resources. So as you can see, we use more than our fair share. This is an interesting, and this is a few years old, but it's still relatively the same. So these are ecological footprints of different countries, and what the ecological footprint means is how much of the planet's surface, how much of the usable planet's surface, because remember most of it's ocean, is necessary to support your lifestyle. And they're measuring it on this one in hectares per person, but if you look at the relative amount. So this green line is sort of if you took all of the usable Earth and divided it by the number of people on the Earth, this would be everybody's theoretical fair share. So as you can see, the U.S. is way above that. We use way more than our fair share. Most Americans, if the whole world lived like we do it, we take 5 planets to support us. And obviously, we don't have those. I've been asked, well, what about China? China is past us now in our greenhouse gas emissions. But basically, they're making stuff for us. So that's really our footprint as well. Because they're making our stuff. Another question that people have is, well, what about climate change? You know, there's a lot of debate about that now. The greenhouse effect is the carbon dioxide that helps hold heat into the Earth, and it is the reason we're not a frozen ball of ice like a comet or something. But climate change is really more than just average warming, which it also is. It's an average warming that's increasing. But it's more than that. It's really this sort of global weirding is what some people term it, and that is that we're expecting storms that are more frequent and more strong. You know, it's gotten so you can't talk about a 100-year storm because you'll have 200-year storms, you know, 1 or 2 years apart. So it's kind of hard. FEMA's having a hard time figuring out what to do. So if you're looking then at minimizing your own personal footprint, you have to look at what are the biggest contributors and how are you going to change those. So I'm going to go into just a few of those. Food is a really big one, partly because we eat a very meat-heavy diet, and animals are inefficient the way that we feed them. It takes a whole lot of food and water to make meat. We often buy our food from far off. We get our, romaine from California. It takes energy to get it here. So one good thing to do is to eat local and eat organic. Support the local farmers at the farmers market. And as Michael Pollan would say, cook. Household energy use adds up, and you can save yourself money, and we can address a big fraction of the household emissions just across the country with existing technology. LED lights are great, they use very little, and those things are contagious. They become these social norms. This is, did I miss one? Oh, okay. So, Brooke was telling you I'm a LEED accredited professional. A lot of people think that a green home is all about energy, or even, water saving and energy saving. And it is very much about that. But if you're not careful, you can end up, if you don't optimize the system, you can pessimize the individual things. So when you look at a green home, you want to look at more than just the energy. So the original Green Home program at the NC Solar Center, the woman who was the director there battened down her house. She had an old historic home in Raleigh. She tightened it up, she replaced the windows, she insulated, she did a great job for her energy use. And then she came down with multiple chemical sensitivity disease because she had, tightened all those chemicals in there, and the air wasn't coming through and cleaning it out. So you have to think of the whole system. And so if you look at energy and water, but also what have you got inside? Have you got formaldehyde in your cabinets that might come out? The FEMA trailers that made people sick, that was formaldehyde. So what are the finishes? Are you using VOC paints? Those kinds of things. Are you using cleaners or pesticides that are going to make you ill? You know, what kind of materials are you using? Are they durable? Are you going to have to throw them out and replace them in 10 years? And what about the sites? Are you keeping the trees? Are you growing native plants? So it's all about all of these things together that make a greenhouse and that provide a diversity of benefits for you as a resident. Energy and water are very much related, and partly that's because it costs money to, it costs water to make energy, and it takes energy to clean and pump water. So when you save one, you save the other. It's always nice to get a double bang for your buck. There's a lot of things you can do that just by keeping up with your home. It's like keeping your car tuned so it runs most efficiently. Same with your house. You know, you can do things like change your air filters regularly and put in LED lights. You can find all sorts of great stuff. Lower settings on water heaters, that kind of thing. And a lot of it is behavior too. You know, turn off the TV when you're in the living room. Turn off the lights. I don't know how many of you, I always grew up with my dad going, "Are you trying to air condition the whole world?" So another good thing like this is to watch steam, because if you get steam and dampness, you can end up with mold problems, which are a really big health issue. And, you know, get a CO2 detector and test for radon, because those are kind of invisible things that you don't see, and they do pose problems in both the short term for CO and the long term in terms of carcinogenesis for radon. And then one that's really fun and useful is landscaping, because if you do your landscaping correctly, you can use it to infiltrate stormwater, which is always fun. You can help with your air conditioning costs by shading your windows and, you know, having big deciduous trees shading your house on the south side. You can attract wildlife. There are places now that are doing what they call pollinator corridors or bee corridors, where they'll have gardens that are strategically located through a community so that the bees can get from, you know, feeding places to feeding places to feeding places. You know, anything you can do that will help the bees is a good thing. And pollinator gardens are great for watching butterflies. And remember that if you want to have butterflies, you not only need the flowers that they're going to eat, you need the plants that the caterpillars can eat. Transportation is a really big source of both greenhouse gases and traditional pollution. And while, you know, EPA has done great things for cleaning up cars and cleaning up fuel and making cars more efficient, we've made up for it by increasing vehicle miles traveled. And we've increased those vehicle miles traveled because we've built our entire lives around cars. VMT and land consumption are growing 3 times the rate of population. So that's not a great line to watch. And parking is a huge thing in terms of the using, you know, land, creating impervious surface that stormwater will flow off of, and creating places that exacerbate the urban heat island effect. So there's 4 spaces per car in the U.S., and we've paved over an area the size of Maryland, and they cost anywhere from $2,500 to $40,000 a piece. So, and we're calling it free parking. A large percentage of congestion is just people driving around. I think I heard for New York it was like 80% of the congestion is people looking for parking space, but a high fraction of congestion in places, just people driving around the block waiting for a stop to open up. So lately, this is really cool. Lately, we're watching the VMT fall off. And this is really cool because it's unexpected. And it doesn't appear to be just because of gas prices. Although that did not hurt when y'all remember when the gas prices spiked? US VMT dropped like by a billion miles in 1 month, just showing how much was possible just because people didn't want to. But it's also, there's evidence showing that it's probably because of changing demographics and this rising. So younger people very often are not, a lot of young people are not driving. I know young people who haven't even gotten a driver's license at the age of 19 or 20. And there is this also rising preference for compact mixed-use neighborhoods. People don't, I'm one, I moved into downtown Chapel Hill so I wouldn't have to get in the car to go everywhere. I was tired of it. So, even though it's getting better, there are still impacts. A lot of Americans spend more time commuting than they do on vacation. And when you look at happiness studies, the activities that make people the happiest, commuting is down in the last 3. So commuting to work is the bottom one. Working is one above that, and commuting home from work is one above that. What's at the top? It's hanging out with your friends. You know, sitting, having dining and special relationships are at the top. But besides that, you end up with this decreased social capital. And one of the things that's done is it's kind of isolated us. People live in the suburbs and they have their trees, but then they spend all their time in their cars. And they've lost this social capital, these social networks that actually provide great health and welfare benefits. Kids turn out so much better if they have good social networks. And adults are both healthier and less depressed. And there's higher creativity in those areas where these social networks, where people can bump into each other and talk. We lose less, we lose intact habitat, which is bad, less exercise. The AARP just recently put out a livability index, which is very cool, which is based a lot on how walkable a place is. And you can put in your address and look and see how livable your place is. We're losing farmland and forests, which is sad, and the runoff from impervious surfaces creates a lot of water pollution problems. So all that stuff that got put up in the air, what goes up must come down, and it ends up in the water. So one of the things that there is to help with these things is smart growth. And these are just some of the principles of smart growth to show you what it means. Walkable neighborhoods, diversity of housing choice. A lot of this is about choice because right now there isn't very much choice. It's like you have to buy what's there, and very often it's the old pattern. So mixes of land uses is a good one, so that you can walk to different things. Another cool thing that you can look for is walk score. You can put in your address and look at what your walk score is, which is similar to the livability index for AARP, but the AARP one also takes into account things like healthcare, proximity to healthcare and stuff. But these are a really cool one. And one of the really interesting things about smart growth is that you have to intersperse the compact, more dense environments with green space, because humans have a biological need. E.O. Wilson coined the term biophilia, but it's true. In Japan they have what they call forest bathing, where you just go walk through the woods. Walking in the woods or being in that kind of an environment is necessary for people. And what we found is, excuse me, being around trees, humans in hospitals heal better, children get better test scores, people have less stress, less depression, all sorts of positive, emotional, and eventually health and monetary benefits from being around trees. So the difference in a smart growth kind of a place and a not smart growth kind of a place is kind of the difference between these two pictures. So trees and places to hang out. See, there's people hanging out on the sidewalk and riding bikes and such. So moving towards sustainability, and I don't expect to see a truly sustainable lifestyle in my lifetime. But right now it's moving towards something. And finding the benefits along the way and making intentional choices. We're not going to get there by accident. But it doesn't require sitting in the cold, in the dark. Amory Lovin says, people don't want electricity. Your kid doesn't want you to go, here's some coal for Christmas, or here's some power for Christmas. People want hot showers and cold beer. Okay. And how do we provide those services without creating the impacts and those unintended consequences? Because those aren't what we want. But it does require us to figure out, I forget who said, Earth can provide for all our needs. It cannot provide for all our greeds. And that's an important thing. Because as Henry David Thoreau, let's use of a fine house if we haven't had a olive oil. So that is the end of my prepared remarks, and we have lots of time for question and answer.